my name is Bethany Harris. I am the handwriting product owner at Twinkl. I did used to be a teacher, so my background is in teaching. I have led English in different schools across the world, and I have an MA in education. Helen, could we have the next slide, please? Thank you. And we are very lucky to be joined today by Dr. Mellissa Prunty. She is a reader of occupational therapy at Brunel University in London. She has done extensive research on handwriting, and she specialises in the difficulties faced by children. So thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here. Okay, we will start today by just having a little look at handwriting and why handwriting is important and why we should focus on it. In this digital age that we live in, handwriting is often seen as less important. And as the world focuses on typing and writing online, it almost feels as though handwriting in schools is taking a back seat. But around 1 in 5 primary school aged children in the UK speak a language other than English at home. Many of these children have no access to English at home at all, and therefore the hours spent in school are the only times they can develop their language fluency. It's crucial then that we really think about the best strategies to support this in our schools. As we know, emphasis on other skills can mean that handwriting is forgotten. Many teachers, I'm guilty of it, I've done it before, definitely. We drop the handwriting lessons if we need to catch up with other areas of English or maths or any other curriculum subject. So we're hoping that after today, we're able to bring some of the writing focus back to handwriting, especially when thinking about ways to best support our EAL learners. So why should we focus on handwriting at all? Handwriting links verbal language acquisition to written language fluency. Essentially, this means it's the physical act of getting our thoughts down on paper and is a building block of writing. It can improve reading and writing using phonics, especially when blending sounds to make words, but it can also aid development in graphophonics, which focuses on the shape of a word rather than identifying sounds. This becomes more important once children move beyond phonics and gain new vocabulary from texts. As we know, if reading improves, children then have a better chance of improving in other areas of the curriculum, including maths. And actually, a few recent studies on handwriting have found that the act of forming letters can engage the mind and allow children to really pay attention to written language. It's also linked with improvements in spelling and composition, as it can help children to make links between letters and words. Next slide, please. I wanted to highlight the Education Endowment Foundation. To those of you who don't know it, they have a wealth of research on education, and academics such as Dr. Prunty advise on and write many of their papers. They published an analysis on the academic achievement of EAL students from ages 5 to 16, and they found that on average, EAL pupils catch up with their peers by age 16. At around age 5, 45% of EAL pupils have achieved a good level of development compared to around 55% of other pupils, whereas by the time they reach age 16, this gap has narrowed significantly and is just under 60% achieving 5 A stars to C GCSE, including English and maths, compared to 60.9. So I think we should take that as a huge celebration point for teachers, because it highlights the tough yet incredible work of educators daily. A nice little celebration point for us there. Before we move on and we hand over to Dr. Prunty to discuss the current research on handwriting, we're very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts today.
Thanks very much, Bethany, and thank you very much for having me here today. So my background is in handwriting difficulties, and in order to sort of study that in detail, we look at a lot at what's involved in handwriting. And so what I wanted to do today was to really position handwriting in the context of writing. For some of you, this might be some revision. For some of you, it might be new for the first time. But what I want to do is to explain the processes involved in handwriting, show what the cognitive and the motor processes are. So when you're working with the children in your classroom, no matter what their background, whether it's SEN or EAL today, that you'll be able to think about what they could possibly be struggling with inside the cognitive processes to do with handwriting. So the first thing I want to talk about is writing more generally, because that's where handwriting belongs. You know, it's a small component of the overall task of writing. And when I say writing, what I mean is idea development, grammar, punctuation, spelling, cohesion, all of the things that you would typically grade or mark when you're looking at a piece of text. And in order to write something, it's really difficult. I mean, writing is one of the most cognitively demanding tasks that we do as humans, because there's so many things at play while we're doing it. So this model that you're looking at is by Virginia Berninger, and it's based on years of research on up to 900 children. And what she talks about is that the first thing to develop is transcription, which is handwriting and spelling. And we're talking about 4, 5, 6 years of age. These skills are so difficult. You know, when you're thinking about phonics, we're teaching phonics for the first time. Being able to map a sound to a visual representation of a letter and to get that down on paper is quite difficult. So the idea that your 4 or 5 or 6-year-old would write a lot of text, text that's interesting, text that has good vocabulary and well-developed ideas, that's just not there. And you know that from being in the classroom. The working memory resources, the attentional resources are so much on getting the letters down onto the page that they don't have the cognitive capacity to think about the low frequency vocabulary or the development of great ideas. So what happens is transcription takes years to develop, and this becomes more automatic through practice. And particularly in handwriting, what we measure in terms of automaticity here is the amount of words that the child can write in a minute on a timed task. Or it can also be the amount of letters that they can write in 30 seconds or a minute. The idea is that you're measuring how quickly can a child get the letters from the brain to the page, and that's a measure of handwriting and automaticity. Now, that's crucial to writing, because we know that there's a really strong relationship between the amount of text a child can write, so how quickly they can get their words down onto the page, and how much they will write overall. But not only that, there's a relationship between the number of words per minute and how good the composition is. So the quality of the ideas, the grammar, the punctuation, the spelling. Anytime a child is labored in handwriting or spelling, you'll usually see less text produced overall, but it's less interesting to read and there's less punctuation and grammar. So these things are difficult. They take a while to develop. And then when children have difficulties with transcription, it can really constrain writing overall. So then what happens is towards the end of primary and into secondary school, vocabulary becomes the major predictor of writing quality. And we're thinking about children who have English as an additional language. So just thinking about what their vocabulary might be like in secondary school. I mean, it depends very much on their circumstances, but we know that writing can be predicted by vocabulary towards the end of primary, early secondary. The idea being that handwriting and spelling are now in place, they're now automatic. So now the writing is governed by language, it's governed by vocabulary. And then towards the middle of secondary school into university, writing is then governed by executive function. So a student's ability to plan their text, to revise their text, to be able to self-regulate themselves as writers. this is really important, particularly towards the middle to end of secondary school. So it's a journey, it's a developmental journey, but what's crucial to the overall performance in writing are these early transcription skills to do with handwriting and spelling. So if we could go to the next slide. What I'll do is then talk about what handwriting involves specifically. So we know it's important for writing overall, but actually it's a very complicated task in its own right. So the first thing that happens is the child activates the intention to write at all. And some of you will have children in the classroom who maybe are disengaging with writing for whatever reason, but the activation of the intention to sit down and to engage with a writing task is the first thing. Then what happens is they start generating ideas about what they might write about. And these ideas are put into sort of large conceptual ideas in terms of semantic retrieval, but then into syntax at the sentence level. So you have to have an idea in the English language, but then you have to craft it into a sentence using rules that govern the English language, which of course is our grammar. So the syntax, the sentence structure would be the next thing to happen. Once they know what they're going to write in a sentence level, they then program the sentence for spelling. And sometimes you might change the word in a sentence if you don't know how to spell it. And, you know, you'll do that all the time. I do that too, but it shows how sort of interconnected these processes are. So you might go back up to the level of syntax, change the word, and then come back down to the level of spelling. So what happens with spelling, it's actually the first level of handwriting, because what happens, which is different to typing, is that you start to think about the sound of the letter that you want to write. So if you want to write the word mum, M-U-M, you map the sound M to the visual representation of the M, which of course is the letter M. Now, in the English language, we can teach letters in different ways. We can have capital letters, we can have unjoined letters, we can have joined letters. So the child will be mapping that sound to what's called an allograph. And the allograph here it's the visual representation of the sound, but crucially, it's the set of instructions to write that letter. So it's the patterns involved in the letter, it's the direction of the patterns, it's the sequence of strokes. And so that's how connected handwriting is to spelling. So you can see that there's a deeper level of processing because they have to process this by hand in terms of generating the strokes themselves rather than just pressing on a key. So once they've programmed the allograph, once they have the set of instructions for the M, for example, they then control it for size. So this is where your lined paper comes in. How big does that M need to be? Is it for a poster? Is it, you know, between two very small lines? But you'll need to program it for size. And then you have the muscular adjustment, because you'll have the message from the brain to the hand, which results in the real-time movement of the pen. So these processes are constantly happening. And so when you have a child who has difficulties in any one of these areas, it will start to impact on how much they produce overall. So in our research, we've focused on children with movement difficulties, difficulties such as dyslexia. We know the literature on language impairment, etc. But it doesn't matter. I mean, if a child has English as an additional language and some of these areas are disrupted, and they may not be in this group. Again, it's a complex group and you'll know your students yourself. But what happens is if there's a disruption in any of these levels, it usually results in less text and less interesting text. So that's just to position handwriting as a cognitive task for you, and to show you that if there's a disruption at the sentence level, the spelling level, the handwriting level, it disrupts flow overall. So if we go on to the next slide, Bethany, I'll sort of bring this to life a little bit and then hand back to you. What we see in terms of handwriting development is as children develop their handwriting fluency, which connects to writing quality, they tend to sort of pause less. So what I mean by pausing is when you're handwriting, you will lift the pen between words. We all do that. But when something up the chain is laboured, whether it's handwriting difficulty, spelling difficulty, a language impairment, or an additional language that they're just starting to learn, what you'll see is that people will pause for very small periods of time inside of a handwriting task. So what you're looking at here is two examples. The example at the bottom is a 14-year-old typically developing boy, and the red circles are pauses, because this is what we look at in the clinic. Now, when you look at the sample of text at the bottom, yes, it's more legible. Yes, there's more of it. But if you just focus on the red circles, this is the pauses. Now, when you're automatic at handwriting, you'll tend to only pause in between words. That's when you lift the pen to move to the next word. So you can see in this piece of text underneath that that's what this child does. They're able to program the spelling of the word, the handwriting for the word, and then they just execute it. It's a burst of writing. There's no interruption. It's automatic, and things are flowing cognitively onto the page. When you look at the sample of text at the top, this is an example of when handwriting or something further up the chain is disrupted, because you're seeing constant pauses in their text. Now, you would not normally see a pause inside of a word once handwriting is automatic and other things are automatic. But in this case at the top, there are constant pauses inside of the word. Now, if you're looking over the child's shoulder in the classroom, you're unlikely to see these because they're quite small. They could be 20 milliseconds. They could be 2 seconds. It wouldn't be something that would catch your eye. But what happens is when these accumulate over a 10 or 20 minute writing task, it actually constrains the amount of text they're going to write. So the boy at the top actually has coordination difficulties, but you can see how disrupted the text is. We also see this in children with dyslexia, children with language impairment. And so if there's anything further up the chain, this is what you'll see in the text. So children with English as an additional language, some of them may still be developing language higher up the chain. They may still be, they might be learning 2 sets of spelling if they're writing in another language, and that's going to have an impact potentially on their writing. So I just wanted you to see this from a research point of view, and to just sort of think about handwriting in terms of its link with writing, but also how it can be disrupted in ways that are to do with cognitive load further up. And so, Bethany, if you could go to the next slide. So what we know about sort of other writing systems is more in my remit to do with the biomechanical elements. So if you're writing in English or a Latin-based alphabet, you tend to move from the left to the right, and you tend to pull the pen, excuse me, you'll pull the pen across the page, and you'll write from left to right. And so you'll move quickly in that direction, pulling the pen. And you'll also have a set of instructions for those letters, because you'll be mapping the spelling to the allograph. If you have a child who's also writing in another language that's not Latin-based, maybe it's in a script base, such as sort of Mandarin or Arabic or Hebrew, what you may see is that they're pushing the pen because they're moving from the right to the left. So biomechanically, if you think about how the hand moves, they're both quite different tasks. And it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. So I guess the first thing is about the cognition and the language ability of the child and where they're at and what their circumstances are. But the second thing to consider is the biomechanical aspect of handwriting, and what scripts are you aware that this child is trying to learn to write in, and it's just being aware of that, really. But I think that's it from me. I might hand over to Bethany now to pick up on her work related to other languages.
Helen, we can stay on that slide for a minute, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mellissa. That was very interesting. I definitely learned a lot from you, so I'm sure everyone else did here today. It's, as you were talking about the Arabic and Mandarin and Cantonese, I think it is very important to think about the particular language that each child speaks, rather than generalizing too much about EAL children in general, especially in terms of whether they're learning from a Latin-based language or not. Thinking about Arabic in particular, obviously the most obvious thing when you look at Arabic is that they will struggle with letter formation. All the letters are completely different, so you have to start by thinking about that with students depending on their level of ability of English, rather than thinking about their age. There's also quite a big difference in Arabic compared to English in terms of the digraphs. They don't have digraphs. They have different sounds, so when they're learning English, there will be new sounds for them to take on board. And actually the process of handwriting itself will help them to support this, to learn the new sounds in English and to practice the letter formation so that they can become more confident writers. I actually had a conversation with Mellissa yesterday, and she taught me something about Mandarin and Cantonese speakers, that because they write in symbols and they don't write with the sounds and the letters like we do, there's actually less cases of dyslexia amongst Mandarin and Cantonese speakers, which I thought was really interesting. Now, Mandarin and Cantonese speakers, they do have a similar sentence structure to English in terms of word order, and words within a sentence must follow a particular order, but it isn't quite as strict as English. So when children are practicing handwriting in schools, it's a really good time for them to think about the grammar and the grammatical structure of English so that they can process those without having to be too creative on the composition of writing. So, of course, they differ greatly to, the Romanic scripts, the Latin scripts, such as German and French. It's very interesting because a lot of research steers us away from teaching cursive script too early, and actually there's very small print now in one of the phonics guidance documents from the government that says we should not be teaching cursive language in EYFS. We should be teaching that further up the school, which we'll go on to in a minute. However, when considering EAL students in your class, if, for example, they were a French writing child and they'd already learned how to write in French, it might be very different, because actually in France they teach cursive straight from they start teaching writing a little bit later, but as soon as children learn to write, they learn in cursive. So that would definitely be something to consider if you had some French speakers in your class that were already able to write, rather than taking them back to the letter formation. If they had already got to that point of flow with cursive writing, then you'd want to carry on with that. If you compare that to then German writing and speaking is a lot more similar to English in terms of the structure, the word order, the sounds, and of course the letter formation. There are a few additional letters and some of the pronunciation is different, but actually in terms of the care and time that you might need to spend on handwriting, it will differ greatly compared to Arabic or Mandarin and Cantonese and lots of other languages. Next slide, please. So thinking a little bit now about having a toolkit and having some resources available to help you to teach EAL learners within your class. Some of you might be coming from a multilingual class and you're looking for resources to support particular students. Some of you might be running some EAL interventions and you've got some sessions where you've got all students who speak English as an additional language. Some of you might be one-to-one online tutors. So we want to try to offer you a range of resources that you can put and choose to put into your toolkit to help you to support teaching handwriting more effectively. So just having a think first of all about young learners and supporting those young learners in terms of teaching them. It does come with many pros when we consider EAL students. This is because their English speaking peers are still learning to form letters as well, and they are therefore in a similar position in terms of learning to write. Of course, their mother tongue will impact their struggles, and the fact that they are potentially learning to write in 2 languages at the same time will slow them down. But luckily, many of the resources suitable for EAL learners are age appropriate and can easily engage young learners. So we do have a range of resources at Twinkl. One of them is our Flying Start handwriting intervention. This is a 6-week intervention, which is designed to go every single day. So, you might use it every day for 6 weeks, you might use it for longer periods. It's also designed so that you can dip in and out of it. So going back to what Mellissa was saying about the different struggles that children might have in terms of the process of handwriting, wherever your group of children or your particular child is, you can sort of dip in and out of this resource based on what you'd like to focus on. And it's really fun. It follows the theme of flying. So they start by practicing some skills before takeoff. Then they have some in-flight tasks to do. So it's all linked to the idea of flying, which they tend to like. And it focuses on boosting those fine motor skills first before then refining some letter formation. It can be used for the EAL children and for English speaking children. So it's also a great resource to have as a whole class boost in handwriting if you want to target different children within your class. We have a range of practice booklets too. Here we've got the Ultimate Letter Formation booklet. Now with our Twinkl handwriting scheme, we have the 4 handwriting characters. So we basically divide the letters into 4 families based on how we form the letters. So we have our curly caterpillars, we have our ladder lemurs, we have our one-armed robots, and our zigzag monsters. And they're fun and engaging. They are, we have lots of animations on the slides for children to engage with. Each letter has a video so that children can watch the video over and over again to practice formulating that letter. And then we have extensive practice for them. For example, these booklets. These booklets can also be used in together with our intervention, so there's no reason why you can't do the intervention and then move on to some of the practices that we have in practice booklets. They are all designed so that you can chop and change between them based on the needs of the children within your class or within your group. And then for something to practice at home, we have got our handwriting formation and handwriting app, and it contains games and activities to practice letter formation, but also number and shape formation. And children can go back and practice them over and over again, and there's multiple activities that they can do. So it's a nice one to offer at home as well. It is a mobile app. Next slide, please. So then we move on to older learners. Obviously, as children get older, we find that sometimes the materials available can feel like they're more suitable for younger children. And as we know, this can be off-putting and can reduce motivation in our learners. I know when I was teaching, this was a huge issue for me. I could never find anything engaging. I'd then spend hours and hours making resources from scratch to give to my students, and it took a lot of time. So we have created resources at Twinkl that hopefully can support you. First of all, we have an intervention for older learners. It's very, very similar to our Flying Start, but it's called Racing Ahead, and it is designed for children aged 7+. It's designed for Key Stage 2, but it can definitely be used for children in secondary school as well. And again, it has a theme. This time it's about racing, so it's all around a racetrack and how the cars compete, and they can enter into races, which is fun and engaging for them. Again, it's 6 weeks with 5 lessons per week, so it's kind of up to you how long that lasts for, and you can jump into it whenever you want, depending on the needs of your group. Again, it focuses on the fine motor skills and letter formation, preparing them and kind of getting them ready for that cursive stage of writing, which we advise at Twinkl that we start that from year 3, from 7, but obviously sometimes that isn't the case. And if you want to go back, or you have any Key Stage 2 children that need that extra boost in handwriting, then this Racing Ahead intervention is a great place to start, to get them back up to where you want them to be ready for the cursive writing. We also have endless numbers of handwriting worksheets, and you can pretty much search for different topics, and there will be different handwriting sheets that come up. And often when you see the handwriting sheet, it will come up in the print, but if you look at the different download options, you can download a number of different scripts. So we do have our cursive and continuous cursive scripts available. There are some other scripts on there that you might want to download instead. So just always have a look to see what different scripts are available for each resource. We also have some activities that focus on fine motor for older learners. So we have lots of different handwriting activities where they can choose a flashcard. They can either work on their own or work in a group to manipulate an object to practice fine motor skills. And the aim of it is to target those older learners. So whatever the topic is, it's something that will be engaging to them, which is always useful. Next slide, please. And then just thinking in bit more specifically at the handwriting styles that we offer, as I did briefly mention before, the government now advise the delay of teaching cursive writing, and in EYFS and Key Stage 1 and through the whole teaching of phonics, we should just be focusing on print to ensure that all misconceptions are addressed and retaught before any cursive is taught. They even advise, if you get to year 3 and children aren't ready, then delay that teaching of cursive until they are ready to move on to cursive script. So the way that we design our handwriting scheme at Twinkl is the Key Stage 1 schemes are the same. So we have 2 schemes. One's called the Journey to Cursive, one's called the Journey to Continuous Cursive. That means by the end of year 6, the aim is to be confident in either cursive script. Cursive script contains breaks in writing, or continuous cursive, which doesn't contain any breaks and all the letters joined together and it starts on the line. That's the 2 distinct differences between the 2. It's really up to the school. It's a personal choice as to which script you choose to follow. People are leaning more to cursive than continuous cursive, but it is essentially up to the school to decide, even though many schools and education organisations do favour the cursive script. So anyway, even though there's 2 different schemes, they both follow the exact same structure in Key Stage 1. So they both follow the letter formation structure and they focus on teaching print. It is then when it gets to year 3, to the Key Stage 2, that they start to look at either following cursive or continuous cursive. So it's a great way to structure teaching handwriting at your school. We have progression maps, so whichever handwriting style you choose to follow, you can then follow the progression map for the whole school and then for each year group. Then within the progression map, it links to a lesson plan, and the lesson plan will give you a PowerPoint, so you can go through it and show children a video of how to form each letter, and there's a space where you can then do some modelling. There are differentiated activities that you can then give to students in your class for them to then be able to practice further. We then have a range of different resources on site that link to the handwriting schemes. Again, as I said about the worksheets, you can always then choose if you want cursive or continuous cursive with our resources, depending on which script you follow at your school. We're also currently working on updating this scheme, and we really hope to collaborate with Mellissa and the National Handwriting Association on this. So we are working on developing this further, and we hope to move forward on that soon. Next slide, please. So we also offer a range of practice booklets at Twinkl. We have multiple different practice booklets available, and they cover a range of different topics. We cover different cultural events across the globe. So it's a great opportunity to then sort of, link this with different things that might be happening, things that you might be celebrating in school, things that particular children in your class might be celebrating at home that you can then, incorporate into your lessons quite easily with very minimal prep, which is always great. And we also have different booklets to teach about the UK and different cultural celebrations that we might have here. So on the flip side, you could then, share some information with children who might have recently arrived in the country, who, are still learning about what happens in the UK on a day-to-day and yearly basis. We also have a range of booklets linked to spelling and history and geography and science. So they're a great way to then bridge the gap and make links between other curriculum subjects and handwriting and English. And it's always good to have, different ways to extend learning and, make links across your curriculum. We are always open to suggestions for new ones too. So please do reach out to us. If you're searching for something on site and you can't find a handwriting booklet on a particular topic, please do reach out to us and let us know, because we're always keen to, add to our bank and get some feedback from customers.